Well, we're getting ready to start the test, and what we've got going on here is a setup. Now here we have the GPU and its temperature sitting here as idly as I can get it, although I am recording on the unit and one of the two is carrying the system as it sits. Now we have, of course, a crystal disk mark over here. You can see the version, and we have, of course, over here we have crystal disk info that we're going to use to look at the M.2 temperatures. I want you to guess which one is in what position and where. Now this, of course, is core temp. I'm looking at this. We've got the maximum temperature set. The system is running, and we've got a completely air-cooled situation. I want you to look when I show you the next segment. I'll show you the layout of the computer, and I want you to tell me, in this completely air-cooled unit with an overclock board, this is using a Z90 chipset, so we are overclocked with a Gen 12 i7. So while we have these 12 cores here. Click like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. I am covering up a little bit here, but when we hit the test and we look at crystal disk info, swap back and forth between the temperatures, you can see we are at 32 degrees on one and 40 on the other. The task is to guess which one of the positions these two very different M.2s are running at, these NVMes are running at. When we stress test them and see what we can get out of this configuration, they're running two different heat sinks, two different locations. All I can do, so I don't have a third position, so the system is running on one of them and I am streaming. So we have this set up to do 1 gig here. This is a little bit bigger test size. We have the sequentials and then the randoms. Randoms usually do go a little bit lower than the sequential because that's just how NVMes work, because they're able to work in a single section without having to switch to random locations. Now right now we will trip this back over to reset the temperatures, and we see that one is at 31, one is at 43. So what do you say we go ahead and start? Now I'll speed this up because this does take a little bit of while to run the read-write test on this section right here. Now as it runs, you can see, because I'm already talking, I haven't sped it up yet. There we go, we're at 69. The unit itself is running at 31 degrees C. Last look, we will click it right after we finish and see what the temperature is at the end of this test. All right, we have concluded the test. Let's check the temperatures back and forth. We'll reset them this way. And we see at the end of the test, we're running the temperatures we're running. We can look at this particular maximum on the CPU. It is running in the 50s at max. We did see that we're running right now 25. So we really cool the processor pretty quickly. The GPU is still running 32. It is overclocked. The GPU is overclocked, the CPU is overclocked, and we're going to look at this next disk drive. Now the test has completed. We're going to go ahead and click it back over to reset the temperatures, and we see what they run at. Now what we're going to do is go back into and click the third partition on one of these and rerun it again. Again, we'll go look back at what we have here before us. Now the test is concluded. Let's reset the temperatures. And there we go. That's it. Let's look at the last, just so I can have it recorded on screen. We see GPU is still unbudged at 32 degrees. We see the CPU temperatures did not break 60, doesn't look like anywhere max during this time. and at idle we are pulling 24 watts. We're running in the 20s in the CPU. Now, as you can see, after these tests, we have maintained that 10 to 12, 8 to 12 type of degree C separation between the two different NVMEs as they are installed. Now we're going to go look at the case setup and let you guess which one is which. They have two different types of heat sinks put on them, and they're two different types of NVMEs, and we're going to see exactly what you think, which one is which. Now this is the setup as we just tested. Now if we come around to the front, we see that I'm using this little cube to check the entering air temperature, which you saw at the beginning of the test. It was to do the ambient. And of course, according to my video here on the phone, we can see that the fans are not really going great guns. They're as low as I can put them. The BIOS should be telling them to go off, but this style of fan doesn't actually go off when it's told to do so. I don't know. It's something I haven't mastered yet. We also go to the back, same series of fans. It's pulling. You can see the air cooler is set up as a pull, so mainly so that I can get to the memory slots right there. So I can get to those if I want to add 2 more sticks. I don't want to pull the thing. Now we look down here. I don't know if we can see accurately below the memory sticks. Let's come on down. Heatsink, it's sitting right on top of that in that lower position, so that puts it directly across from one of the 2 fans, the second fan, because the first one is actually down in this position. So we should be getting, even if we're pulling toward the top, we should be getting quite a bit of airflow across that one. Now we also go over to here. Let's see if I can get in between here. There is the Sabrent sitting between the cooler, under that cooler that produces heat, and the GPU backplate, which I believe is metal. When I've touched it, it was feeling like metal, not quite like plastic. So that's the setup. Tell me what you think, which drive is the crucial, sitting in the lower position or the upper position. Where is the Jupiter drive? Now we're ready to talk about what we just watched, okay? Now the configuration is such that I have 2 partitions, 2 DOS drives running on one NVMe. One obviously of those is going to be the system drive. The other one is used as data. And we have a second NVMe set up as the other drive, and I ran 3 tests. The question I have for you is, now if you've taken your notes, if you didn't, stop here before I go too far and give you the results. Go back and watch them again and see what happens. See about the temperatures, how the temperatures. We see that we're maintaining about that 8 to 12 degrees C variation between the 2 positions in the case. Now remember, this is completely air cooled. We not only have 2 very different NVMEs from 2 different manufacturers, but we also have 2 different locations on the board, 2 different spots in the airflow, 2 different types of heat sinks. So which one do you think is the cooler running NVMe? Because they're both stated to be about the same data rate, peak data rate. Let's go back and see what we have. If you need to, do it now. Again, this is your second shot. Which one do you think is where? Because we've seen the layout. Which one is the cool one? Which one is the hot one? Now that we've got that out of the way, let me reveal to you what we've got going on. C obviously is the system drive, and F is also a partition on that system drive NVMe. That one is a T500 from Crucial. Now it has got a It has a 5-year warranty, and it says that it's good for 7,400. Now the other one in the other position is this Fickwatt, this Jupiter, and it is good for, I think, 7,200. And we see that in the situations that we have it, neither one of them produce their rated speed. Now I have a little bit of a statement to do with the T500, that the T500 was handicapped in this, in that we have it sitting in the position under the air cooler and between it and the, of course, GPU. The GPU wasn't really producing a lot of heat, and so it was working, but it also has a much smaller type of heat sink. Now the Jupiter is sitting under this heat sink we have here with the deep aluminum fins, and I think it's a pretty good design for where it sits in the airflow, because it's going to blow directly horizontally across those fins and maybe up a little bit if they go out toward the fans. If we have enough pressure, they'll push out straight across underneath the GPU. So I don't have the Sabrent box. I thought I did, but my little paws can't lay themselves upon the Sabrent. It has a little bit of a heat pipe type thing, but it's very low profile. The heat fins were actually the first one that I had, but it conflicted in the position between the GPU and, of course, that massive, what is it, Ghost something another, I think it, no, Phantom Spirit. Hey, appreciate you watching. Do me a favor, if you will, subscribe to the channel, either the YouTube or the Rumble channel, which this appears in. And if you can, check the notification bell or settings to make sure that you get notified when new videos are posted. Appreciate it. The heat fins were actually the first one that I had, but it conflicted in the position between the GPU and, of course, that massive, what is it, Ghost something another, I think it, no, Phantom Spirit air cooler. So what we see is, I don't know if you caught it, but I actually tested the Jupiter twice. I tested the Jupiter twice, and it got two different results, even though it's sitting where it's sitting. We didn't see a great difference in the actual NVMe's temperature in either of those two runs. I ran it first, and then I ran it last to repeat it, because I didn't want, if we were going to say the box temperature heated up, I didn't want to say that we were handicapped that one, and it actually ran faster in the last test versus the first test. So what does that tell you? Well, if I'm repeating myself, I'm repeating myself, but when you watch these reviewers online with these type of reviews on, say, the T500, you don't really know the full condition of it. You think we're going to test it, if we have to test it in the same slot each exact time, how we're running our setup, because the T500 is handicapped because the CPU is also having to run back and forth to do the streaming because it's the system drive. And so it was handicapped a little bit down lower, and I'm not particularly disappointed to see that. If we were to do it in a different configuration where the system drive is, it would have a different result. But when the testers test these things, they also, I bet you, do not do 30 runs on each one of the NVMEs, which means you're not really getting an accurate reflection of the performance of that particular device. But we do see that it didn't get, neither one of them got excessively hot, even though we ran a fairly tough set of tests on each one of them. So what am I saying? Well, the first thing to do is consider how you're doing your airflow design. Design your airflow. Don't just stuff it full of fans because you want to see pretty lights. If you want performance, if you really want performance, many times you're going to work on those fan curves and set it, one, to not dust up your case by running it at minimums more often. And if there's not really a benefit, we see the temperature in these cases, even though I was running at idle, as low as I can have those fans run, unless the CPU hits above 50, you're not really needing a lot of airflow on either one of them. The temperatures are absolutely rock solid. It's an air-cooled case. The T500 is the one that is nestled in between that heat-releasing Phantom Spirit and the GPU itself. But the GPU in this case was not particularly hot. The benefit of, in most boards, the way they are set up, if you look at the block diagram, pay attention to whether or not you're using for your NVMe, if you're using the top slot, which if you're trying to do Gen 5, if you're running water and you're not getting anything off of the CPU, then that's one set of variables that you have to look at. If the GPU is also air cooled, that backplate is probably going to get a little warm, assuming that it is in fact metal instead of plastic like some of the cheaper units have. So you have a lot to think about when you position it. And the first thing you want to think about is, how do you mentally process all of these different reviews from seemingly reputable individuals? I'm sure they're doing a good job, and if they're benchmarking in the same way with each one, that's fine. That is as fair as you're going to get. But you might also see that none of them in real life, even though they're not hot, do not produce the test results as advertised, largely because you're not running the same test they ran at the factory when they designed it. Now, a closing word is, never take off the sticker of your NVMe. It's a stupid thing to do. It's just as dumb as delitting a processor, because the first thing you do when you do either of those two things is you destroy any kind of warranty you had for that device. Now, $100, $200 for an NVMe is not that much money if you're willing just to take it off, but it doesn't do any real good. It doesn't do any practical good, and you would have to run 30 with it on, then rip it off, run 30 more tests with it off, see which one is there, and then if it happened to be better with the paper on it that keeps your warranty information, it's gone. So you're not going to get much from it. And just think about this. This is not to be insulting, but this is to tell a lot of people the gosh honest truth. If it really affected performance that much, they would find some other way to protect their investment by giving you the warranty information. Now, when you take it off, you've got nothing. And it doesn't do any good anyway. Are you actually smarter as a gamer or system guy than the engineers who designed that product? And that's where we get into a lot of this problem. You might get more performance by jacking your Honda Civic in gear very quickly, running through its ratios, but you're probably taking life off the engine and transmission in the car itself. So use a little common sense, play it conservatively in my mind, and you can have a good, stable experience. So the executive summary, in case you missed it, the T500 Crucial is sitting in the hot spot with the smallest heatsink, in between obviously those two heat sources, the CPU and GPU. And we see that the Jupiter ran very differently in both cases, even though it's sitting in a great airflow with a huge massive heat sink on it. And yet it ran hotter. Why is that? Well, despite functionality as far as the speeds, we know that neither one of them was anywhere close a high temp situation where they were throttling. So I think we can dispel the rumors and conclusions that people have when they misinterpret the random test, the lower two test on the Crystal, that throttling down because of heat. It's not. It's the nature of where it's going. And you might expect a larger area that has to, because it's just a bigger drive that partition is sitting on, gives it more room to be more random because it's a bigger drive. Now, both F and D had exactly the same files on them, and they're different percentage of full, but they're like 20% full, 30% full, something like that in each one of them. The F drive, which is the Crucial T500, is actually a larger partition, so it's actually bigger than the 1 gig Jupiter, but that's also part of it too. The Jupiter only has half as much NVMe to work around, even though we're using a lower 5.5 gigs there for, that's 5.5 of the terabyte, 100. It's got half of that there, and the other half, although they're not similar halves, they are bisected. The T500 is a bigger drive, and it's having more area to write over, more possible area to write over, and the drive itself, the controller on the drive, is actually controlling a NVMe that's twice as big as the Jupiter. And so we wouldn't really expect them to have the same but neither one of them throttled, and yet we did not get the rated results. So don't believe everything you see on the internet, because you don't know how it's tested. Yeah, I watch them too. You watch them. We all watch these things, but they never go into the details. They just say they ran the test, because I guess that's what they get when they're sampled the materials, or have to buy them, either one, and then they have to produce the content, because the content is their big thing that they're doing. It's not really information, it's content they're producing, and who cares if the results are exactly the same. And yet, as Churchill said, a lie will make its way halfway around the world before the truth gets its trousers on. And that's what we see. We fill ourselves with this influence, this information that we get from other people, and we don't really know how good it is, whether there's any nefarious reasons behind it or not. I don't know that there is in most cases, but it is what it is. And here we see kind of a practical example that even the Jupiter won't run the same way twice with the same exact test at the same day, with just, a few minutes in between them. We only put the T500 in there between them. We didn't test C, we just did D twice and F once. So what do you think? Did this open your eyes to anything, or bring to you any different type of thing that might shape your bias in the future? Remember, the price tag has a lot to do with it, and the price tag may be attached to the name, because I certainly trust Crucial more than I do somebody I don't even know who this is, Fickwad or whatever. They may be very good. Team Group, not everybody. Somebody's got a list of things. They break everything down by tiers, and they say this is good, this is bad, this is whatever. Well, it's also very dated, a long time ago in most cases, when if it's the one I'm seeing, and I don't really know that there's a lot of integrity in that list, but the list was compiled nonetheless. The old serial ATA drive that was in there, the old 120 that was in the old computer, 8 years, never had a problem. It just was limited to what serial ATA does. Replaced it with 2 more Team Groups, and they work pretty good. I'm running Oli, or the Owl memory in this box, and it's not giving me any trouble. So name brands may give you confidence, they don't always give you results. And at the same time, we saw a huge difference in result of temperatures in the Crucial design that we did not see in the other one, even though it's twice as big. So they're doing something there on the die. It's probably a smaller die for each one of those, because the chips are still, we still have an 80 millimeter NVMe anyway. So we may think that they're doing something different in their design of their NAND that's more efficient, so it's not getting as hot. But either way, neither one of them got hot, and neither one of them in either condition produced the rated speed. So don't expect rated speed necessarily. You may get it once or twice, but I bet you can't do it 30 times in a row, no matter whose equipment you have. It'll all have a different result each time. So that's it. Have a great day. Oh, I forgot to tell you, click like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. Well, hello everybody. I'm adding this after the videos were completed and edited and getting ready to post. I'm just waiting for the time of the month when these will show. When, after doing some additional testing with particularly, Cinebench, that really heats up a processor to the max, and tweaking out XTU a little bit more to get another gigahertz there on the processor, I had it heated up pretty good. And to be quite honest, that Sabrent, that Crucial that is tucked in between the GPU and the CPU, I did manage to elevate that temperature up to about 46 degrees. So that is environmental. And so your heat sink in that area, however you're taking the heat off of, that's going to be very critical. And you can solve that just by going custom loop. And if you don't want to go custom loop, you can do AIO. They're good for about 5 years. And it's a lot of this has to do with how well you ventilate your case, how well it breathes. Now in my case, because I don't do a lot of online streaming anymore, and even using the streaming setup, it doesn't use much processor power, so I don't get the fan curves to activate on that high end. But I do really believe that there is a difference in how the dies for the memory chips and the controllers work. And part of this was to dispel a rumor. I saw somebody who made the clear false assumption that their M.2 SSD was being throttled by heat when they did that random right, because your real mileage is going to vary depending on how you drive, and that's what you need to always think when you take these online reviews of this stuff, because it's not always going to be the way unless you know how they tested it. They may have just got a good test in their standard setup. So there is a lady that I have found after doing this, before I even get it posted, because the algorithms want to show me now SSDs all over the place. There's a lady in the Netherlands who does a lot of SSD testing. Now, the problem with most of that is these tests that we see on YouTube are all old. There's new products being brought out every day to compete. You know, if someone gets a product put out there and they ship it to the people that do these influencings, and it doesn't mark all the way at the top, well, then they'll come up with something slightly new and have that retested, and maybe they get a better shot the next time. So anyway, I just thought I might add this on. I don't want to make this any longer than possible. So there you have it. Thank you.